Hey, it's been a minute. So this is part 4 of 4 for our Rockumentary series. Links to the full playlist will be wherever you can find it. But yeah, in the first episode, I kind of touched on the idea of audience members, but I want to expand on that further, so that's what this episode's all about. Yeah, let's get into it. From documentary to fiction, all film and media texts occupy real estate on this spectrum of truthfulness, where some films attempt to offer a curated escape from reality, others try to preserve its realness or poke fun at it entirely. One such genre, the rockumentary film, aims to capture a realistic image of artists who, through their own artistic ventures, are also distorting presentations of the real. Rockumentary films intend to present recorded histories of artists and allow for audiences to reach their own conclusions, yet are still constructed works of art and I think should be treated as such. For example, whether commercially or artistically, several projects within this genre have a habit of depicting its subjects at their cultural peak, or at the very least in a favorable light. Now I get it, this union in theory makes sense. After all, given that musical artists live such eccentric and unorthodox lifestyles, it's often interesting to behold their spectacle at its fullest or most hopeful potential. That being said, an often novel or overlooked facet of the genre, however, is films which opt to tell the story of a group at their worst, or perhaps at a point of no return. By means of formal cinematic elements, film viewing audiences can thrive and struggle alongside artists on screen. Audiences within the filmic worlds themselves, however, seemingly hold little agency when thought of in this same emotionally charged conversation. A few questions come up from this. What influence do the filmed audiences have on a band's success in a rockumentary? Can a group ever really be transparent with their followers? And is a band ever successful if their numbers do not reflect their happiness? Well, these questions strike a resonant chord with two rockumentary films in particular. Anvil, the story of Anvil, and one of my personal favorite films of all time, This is Spinal Tap. These two films, a documentary which plays with narrative form and a parody which makes fun of it respectively, present nearly identical narratives which approach questions of realness and audience agency in very opposing ways. Where Anvil's fans are passionately involved in the group and their legacy, Spinal Tap's fans retain no agency or importance outside of giving the artists a simple paycheck. In the following video essay, I will compare elements of mise-en-scène and narrative across both films to uncover to what extent the concert rockumentary can portray audience members as integral to an artist's love for their work. Wow, that was a handful to say. We gotta go big or go home though. This is the finale. Let's get into it. Before a comparison may occur, unlike the other episodes, I'm going to offer a brief plot summary of each film. First off, This is Spinal Tap. The film propounds a mockumentary-style critique of tropes common to rockumentary filmmaking and rock and roll culture writ large. The parody sees the English rock group Spinal Tap stumble their way through an international tour of the United States, while amid the promotion of their latest record, Smell the Glove. A plethora of cancelled shows, low audience turnouts, unwanted changes to the album's artistic direction, and rotten reviews builds tension within the group and subsequently invites lead singer David St. Hubbins and lead guitarist Nigel Tufnell to reassess the relationship as longtime friends and bandmates. Switching over to Anvil, in a remarkably similar fashion, Anvil, the story of Anvil, follows the Canadian thrash metal group as they embark on a precarious European tour and produce their 13th studio album, the self-released This Is 13. The once influential band, well past their commercial prime and rightfully frustrated at record companies and their unsupportive management, uses their time on the road to reflect upon their impact and dreams in the music business. Themes of friendship and purpose similarly tear apart and reunite the band's core duo, frontman Steve Lips Kudlow and drummer Rob Reiner, not to be confused with Spinal Tap's director Rob Reiner, Rob with one B though, who started the band and watched it ultimately fall into significance. Now, in further examining each film's narrative, I found a lot of coincidences with regards to side characters and their influence on the band's morale. For example, Anvil's booking agent, Tiziana Aragoni, in a very similar fashion to David's girlfriend, Janine Pettibone, serves more as an agent of chaos throughout the tour than what their job actually entails. Tiziana's poor booking rids Anvil of opportunities to connect with their audience, and Janine's romance with David and resulting power over the group negatively impacts Spinal Tap's artistic voice and thus turns their fans against them. If you've seen both films, you'll know that both women intervene on the group's dynamic on the road to a point where, like, even their involvement becomes a topic of contention among band members. But here's the thing, where managers dwindled much of the group's spirits, the people of Japan, interestingly enough, brought that spirit back in both movies by commercially kickstarting the band's careers from their lowest points. Both rockumentaries end with the artists touring Japan, in the process filling arenas far bigger than they have seen in recent memory. Given that each group fell into obscurity long before this Asian tour, Japan and its people in this context could be interpreted as being behind the curve on trends in popular music. Regardless of their musical tastes, however, both films do depict Japanese audiences as the group's most energetic and passionate fans in a long time, thus rendering them sources of hope in the band's larger canons. This image transitions nicely into a crucial point of contention when comparing both films. As previously mentioned, while both films' narratives are nearly identical, one film frames it as real while the other openly mocks it. Using the people of Japan as an example, Anvil really found joy in a second life abroad, whereas Spinal Tap, over 20 years earlier, used the same narrative situation for comedic effect. It is fitting, too, that actually both films foreshadow Japan's involvement here. Two Japanese fans encourage Anvil to perform in Japan whenever possible, as Spinal Tap are asked whether or not they'll milk their brand overseas for a few more years. I find it really interesting that in these two identical narrative arcs, Japanese audiences are depicted both as loving and supportive fans of Anvil, and kind of as mindless agents, dumb enough to give Spinal Tap attention for just a little bit longer. Now, of course, that's an interesting comparison, but where does that leave audience members from the initial tours? Well, let's begin with Anvil. In beginning with Anvil, their fan base is largely comprised of longtime listeners and influential musicians in their own right. The film's opening talking head interviews show Lars Ulrich, Lemmy Kilmister, and Slash, among other famous rock personalities, actively respecting Anvil's discography and influence on the 80s metal scene. Okay, while Anvil did retain this musician's favorite musician label, they also did receive a lot of sympathy from the same figures. These celebrities asked why their careers left them for dead, so to speak, when every successful group to supersede them, including those celebrities, took something from their original sound. I think the film attributes this limited popularity to a variety of factors. It could have been in part from a wrong place, wrong time situation, or a lack of strong management, or perhaps the band members themselves didn't have the chops to fully make it. Now, that's not to say Anvil's influence never existed, though, as their legacy and brand quickly surfaced from their first 3 studio albums. Hard and Heavy, Metal on Metal, and Forged in Fire, these projects pioneered 80s thrash metal and inspired more famous acts such as Metallica and Slayer to begin making music of their own. It kinda goes without saying that this meteoric rise fizzled out quickly though, as Anvil had a lot of other projects which fans never took to. I'm just looking it up right now, apparently they have 15 additional studio albums in addition to another one set to release this year. That's crazy. Now, what's left of Anvil's following in the film is a small yet loyal fan base of true metalheads who retained a love for the group beyond those initial 3 releases. It's fitting as well that these diehard fans, integral to the group's survival, are given a brief segment within the film itself. Cut Loose and Mad Dog, longtime fans of the group who had been to several hundreds of their shows, developed a personal relationship with the band members and each got songs named after them. As well, people of all kinds, including Tiziana herself and future members of the band, were fans of Anvil too and felt prideful and fortunate to be a part of its ongoing history. I think the draw for Anvil's following was their longevity, the fact that despite being repeatedly cast aside for younger and arguably more explosive acts, they were still around and performing for whoever wanted to see it. Songs are sung for and named after fans, and Lips relays brutal honesty with his fans by openly telling them about his struggles as an underpaid and underappreciated talent in the music industry. One big thing in the film is that despite being bound to their less than favorable 9-to-5 careers, Lips and Rob work tirelessly to be able to interact with and play for their supporters on their vacation time. As is reinforced by the film's penultimate voiceover, the most important thing to this group is the relationship to their fans and to their culture, no matter where it manifests itself. How does Spinal Tap compare? Well, simply put, their admirers display very limited support for the group, if any at all. Are they even real fans? Well, the film seems to avoid this question at all costs, in part through fictitious director Marty DeBurgi, played by Reiner himself. Marty opens the film in a nearly identical fashion to Anvil, recalling Spinal Tap's undeniable power in their early careers. Where his reflection differs, however, is in comedically referring to the group as
one of England's loudest bands.
Though that is a great line, and yes, it is played for comedic purposes, this title does suggest that Spinal Tap grew into prominence not necessarily because of a loyal or supportive fan base, but rather due to them just not taking no for an answer. As a result of this ridiculous and stubborn presence in the rock scene, Marty's involvement in this documentary kind of appears to be driven by a professional agenda rather than a love for the band themselves. As well, Spinal Tap's fans, if they could even be called that, approach their support for the group in a similarly distant fashion. Brief interview segments depict fans as negative or mindless drones, perhaps just at the concert because it's the trendy thing to do. Unlike Cut Loose and Mad Dog, fans here offer no insightful commentary on the group or why they resonate with their message. In fact, these audience members, again for comedic effect, are depicted as unaware of their surroundings in general, as if to say Spinal Tap's listener base was clueless to begin with, even before their careers began to fall. Throughout the film, we see the band decline, and it's not like the North American fans are trying to help boost their morale, far from it. Audience members are seen actively giving the group thumbs downs, or in the worst of cases, not showing any emotion whatsoever. The band's critics do offer some constructive feedback, though their hilariously negative and blunt approach reads as a personal attack on the artists in addition to their music.
The review you had on Shark Sandwich, which was merely a 2-word review, just said, "Shit sandwich."
Now this begs the question of whether or not Spinal Tap had loyal fans to begin with. The band's original fan base seemed to have consisted of a large body of young English rock fans, a number which likely grew smaller and smaller because of these increasingly panned albums. The sad reality for Spinal Tap is that this blissful ignorance repeatedly puts them in situations doomed to fail. From Stonehenge to the Army Social, each poor artistic decision and underfilled venue further alienates the group from whatever original audience they believed to have. And this notion of belief runs deep within the group, as their lack of effort when connecting with their fans does not stop them from believing their fans want to take photos with them, or attend their merchandise signing event, or even attend their concerts for that matter. One passing yet insightful moment in the film sees the limo driver, keep in mind he is the only guy who ever tried to form a meaningful connection with the group, immediately getting shut down by them after trying to talk to them. What remains is a band whose expectations of love and affection cloud their own isolated reality and isolating tendencies. Where the film's devised audiences offer opposing attitudes, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about that both films, the creation of both of these films, garnered their own newfound fan bases in general. Spinal Tap's characters, yes, they did exist before the film's release, though it was the film itself which carved their own place in popular culture. Moreover, Anvil received parallel praises and drew a lot of new fans towards their discography and community. In attending reunion concerts and screening other media appearances they have done, fans in real life have rendered the group's legacies as forever linked to their on-screen appearances. So how did this all unfold for longtime fans and newcomers alike? Well, in circling back to the introduction's discussion of a curated truth, Spinal Tap approaches discussions of image through humor, whereas Anvil, in part, approaches the same topic from a love for music and perhaps a desire for sympathy. Seeing both groups at their lowest points is somewhat unique for the genre and frames audience members, both real and fake, as integral to the group's survival. On one hand, Anvil the Story of Anvil depicts fans as human, emotionally complex, and proud to be a part of the band's story and love for performance. On the other hand, though, Spinal Tap's fans, outside of ticket sales, are given zero agency, while also exhibiting no desire for that same agency. The same emotional depictions of audience members for Anvil are played for comedic effect in Spinal Tap, a contrast which not only binds these two texts together, but also offers widely differing depictions of audience members in the rockumentary genre. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to check out more, check out the other 3 parts of this series. I've also done music reviews, I've talked about artists I like in the past. Yeah, subscribe and like if you haven't done that already, and that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.